Die Ellen hat ein wunderbares Buch geschrieben, eine Autobiografie, also es ist nicht über sie, sondern es ist von ihr, Lessons in Becoming Myself. Vor 10 Jahren hat sie das geschrieben, ein wirklich schonungsloses, fast Enthüllungsbuch über ihr eigenes Leben. Da sind Sachen drin, die haben mich wirklich tief berührt und geschüttelt. Also ich kann es jedem empfehlen, der mehr über Ellen erfahren wird, aber wir wollen nur ein bisschen die Biografie aufarbeiten. You were born in Detroit in 1932 and had the difficult childhood that you write about with your mother, and then left home on your 18th birthday. And that's an experience I think that informs all your work. I mean, every movie I've watched with you, I had to think of that struggle that you went through. You know.
I don't think struggle's a bad thing.
Right.
You know, I think the sad people that I know are the ones that nothing ever happened to them. You know, that they grew up with a loving mommy and daddy and a nice little house and went to school and graduated and got married and had children and, you know, had a reasonably pleasant life. And I don't know, when I'm in that atmosphere, I get very nervous. You know, I want something to happen.
They say happy people are not interesting, yes, but that makes your work all the more interesting. I mean, every character you play has that something burning inside.
Trouble deepens you.
Uh-huh.
You know, when you have to cope with difficult things, you call on areas of yourself that otherwise would just lie dormant. Mm. So. Most of the actors I know have had terrible childhoods.
Well, good for them. Yes.
Yeah, it's useful.
You got on a bus when you turned 18 and went to Dallas with just a couple dollars in your pocket, and
that much.
That's what you say in the book, and then went from department store to, or there was a fashion fair going on. You went from one salesman to the next. Looking for a job, and that's a scene that we see later in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that experience?
Well, you know, I was 18 and I didn't know any better, so I thought you only needed enough money to get to the next town, and then you got a job and everything would be all right. And that's not quite how it happened. So I arrived in Dallas in the hot summer. And everybody was out of town because it's too hot in Dallas in the hot summer. So there wasn't any work as a model. And I just kept trying, going to different stores and places that were hiring models for the moment. And it was a little difficult. But I finally got a job. And just as they were about to lock me out of my hotel room, I said, well, I told you I could pay the bill today. But I just got the money that day.
And then you wound up leaving Texas for New York and decided you were going to become an actress. You just decided that.
Well, I was still a model. I didn't become an actress for a few years. But I did leave. I did arrive in New York with 25 cents. I took the train from Texas, and it was about, I think, an 18-hour trip, as I recall. I've forgotten how many hours, maybe 24. And I didn't have enough money for food. And there was a group of soldiers across the aisle from me, and they had a bag of apples, which they kindly shared with me. So I read Titus Andronicus, Shakespeare's Titus Andronicus.
A little light reading in the train.
Yeah, from Texas to New York, and ate apples from soldiers. It was a fun experience.
And then you got into New York and managed to find work as a model, I guess?
First as a dancer in a nightclub,
Mm-hmm.
and then as a model, and then I worked as a model for a few years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But then how did you decide to turn to acting?
And then one day I said, I've made up my mind to be an actress. I'm going to do a Broadway play this fall. Does anybody know how I can get an audition? and And somebody said, yeah, I can get you an audition. I know of a Broadway play, but the character is a model, and they're looking for one. So I got an audition, my first time on a stage in New York, and they called me back, and I did another audition, and then they gave me the part. So I opened on Broadway in a leading part, which I considered very encouraging.
But it wasn't that easy, was it?
Well, it was easy until I actually had to do it, and then there was all the backstage trouble and the people fighting and a lot of drama going on that I hadn't counted on.
You had no training as an actress.
I had no training. No, I worked for about 7 or 8 years with no training, and then one day I decided to go to. I decided that there were actors working who knew something I didn't know, and I could tell. So I found out who their teacher was, and it was always Lee Strasberg, so I went to him.
Tell us about Lee Strasberg. What was your first encounter like? What was he like?
He was a psychological surgeon. He would look at you and see into you. And I had never had that experience before. So the first time he saw me, when I worked in class, he took away my mask, which I didn't know I was wearing.
He could see right through you, or how can we imagine?
Yeah, the first exercise is to create a cup of whatever you have for breakfast. In my case, a cup of coffee. So it's an imaginary cup that you pick up and you create it so that you can really feel it, and you can feel the temperature, and you can feel the weight of it and what it's made of. And so I was working on my cup, and he said, Ellen, do you ride horses? Now, when a man comes at you from that angle, do you ride horses when you're working on a cup? Something's coming. So I said, well, I used to. I had my own horse for a while. And he said, when you rode, did you ride well? And I said, yeah, pretty well. And there was a long pause, and he said, well, you don't have to ride that cup. And I looked at him. I wasn't sure exactly what he meant. And he said, what if you made a mistake? Go on. Make a mistake. And I started crying. Because in the house I grew up in, the price of making a mistake was physical. And it took a long time. It really took a long time to just be on stage and be on stage. That's one of the really hard things to do. It's not so hard to pretend you're somebody else, but to actually be present on stage takes a lot of training.
I think that's what us non-actors are so fascinated by about the craft, is that you're becoming yourself by becoming someone else. Your book is called Lessons in Becoming Myself, and you're an actress.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah, it's kind of a paradox, but you can't really walk in someone else's shoes before you can walk. You have to create a character out of what you really know. And what you really know is your own experience. And so it's not that you don't find another way to walk or talk or, an accent or other superficial expressions of a character. But the inner life of the character, you know from your own inner life. And you use those experiences to infuse reality into the character, because what we're always looking for is to be real. And that's not the same as natural. You can be natural, but not real. So that's what took so long to learn, what is real? And that question continues throughout life, I've found, and experiences. Are my feelings real? Are my beliefs real? Are my attachments based on something real? So that question continues, and I find it to be the most important question. You see the world through your own development. If you can't evaluate with some consciousness, then the world becomes incomprehensible.
That's the method, kind of. That's what we're talking about, method acting.
Elia Kazan, who was really the founder of the Actors Studio, said there is no such thing as method acting. There's only method rehearsal process. Mm-hmm. And I say there are two kinds of acting, good acting and bad acting. Thank you. Thank you.
But you weren't actually in the Actors Studio at that point. You were taking private lessons from Lee?
Well, Lee had his private classes, mm-hmm. which I took for a year or two. I can't remember how long. And then I auditioned for the Actors Studio and got in, mm-hmm. and became a member. And I've been involved in the studio ever since. Co-president with Al Pacino, and artistic director, and have been for years. So I teach there. But
then, based on your lessons, you were able to get more work. In the 60s, you started doing a lot of television work. I guess you started with the Jackie Gleason show, a famous American comedian. Can you talk about working with Jackie Gleason?
Does that name mean anything over here? Do you know Jackie Gleason? Well, he had a live television show, and he played all these different characters. And there were a lot of girls on the show. I was one of the girls. And there were the June Taylor dancers, and there were the showgirls, and then there were a group of girls that we were the lead-in to the commercial. We were the tie-in between the show and the commercial. So that's what I did. But the good part was that it was a live show every Saturday night, and we rehearsed all day. And so I came to the theater early in the morning and then watched rehearsal, which I learned a lot. But Jackie didn't come in until the show. So other people would play his part. So all the comedians of New York would come in and during rehearsal and do their stand-up comedy routines in the spots where Jackie would be working. So I got to see all the great comedians of that period. And I know I learned my timing from them. It was a really great experience.
Mm. It's amazing that you started in comedy, I think, because so many of your roles are so serious and tragic often. But do you see a big difference? I mean, somehow comedy is tragedy with a happy ending.
I don't know if there's any difference, when you have, for instance, Alice doesn't live here anymore. It's a drama, but it's got a lot of humor in it. And I think humor is funny. I think it's important. I think people like to laugh, and they like to cry. Billy Friedkin one time said to me, people go to the movies for one of three reasons: to laugh, to cry, or to be scared. And then as an afterthought, he went, or to think. So I like to make people laugh and cry.
In 1971 came Peter Bogdanovich's last picture show, who was just up and coming then. He came out of a film critic's career, and he had the kind of inspiration from the French New Wave and thought, I can do it better, and set out and actually proved he could. But what was it like working with him?
I had this scene where I'm sitting in my living room at night in front of the TV. My husband is asleep next to me. I'm reading a magazine. I'm bored to death. And I hear my lover's car drive up in front of the house. And so I get up, I'm very excited. Yay, my lover's here. And I walk out of that room, and the camera's taking me. into the other room, and I go to the door, and I open the door, but it's not my lover. What was his name? I forgot his name. Abilene.
Abilene.
And it's not my lover, it's my daughter. And darn, I thought it was my lover, it's only my daughter. But wait a minute, it's my daughter getting out of my lover's car. That can't be good. And then I see she's very sad. At first I'm a little jealous that she's getting out of my lover's car, but then I realize she's sad, and it occurs to me that they've had sex, and my daughter is no longer a virgin. And I welcome her into my arms and bring her in. So we're sitting there waiting to do it. There are no lines. And they're lighting, and I'm sitting with the magazine, and suddenly I say, Peter, I have 8 different changes between this and the end of the scene, and no line. And he smiles impishly and says, I know. And I said, well, how am I going to do that? And he said, just think the thoughts of the character and put everything else out of your mind, and the camera will read your thoughts. That's great direction. Yeah. And, you know, it's true. You don't really have to show what you're thinking. You know, if you're really going through the changes and they're real to you, and you make them real to you, then the camera reads it.
Last Picture Show was a big success for an indie film. It made, I think, $20 million. And then William Friedkin came to you with The Exorcist, or how did you get cast in The Exorcist?
Yeah, I guess he did. Sent me the script. Of course, it was a very popular book at the time, and everybody knew the movie was being made, and every actress who was right for the part wanted it, you know. So when I heard that he was sending me the script, I got very excited. But I asked him to not have me come to his office, but for him to come to my house, because I didn't want that kind of office atmosphere, which he did. And we had a really nice meeting. And then he said to me, I'm not going to lie to you. It's between you and Anne Bancroft. I'm going to New York tomorrow. I'm going to talk to her, and then I'll let you know right away, which I thought was sporting of him. And so the next day he called me and said, okay, you've got the part. And I said, oh, did you see Anne Bancroft already? He said, I ran into her in the deli, and she looked awful. So, and I said, well, that's not fair. I look awful in the deli, too. And he said, yeah, well, this is the way the cookie crumbles. So ever since then, I always wear makeup when I go in the deli.
But you went pretty far with that movie. I mean, you had physical damage from the stunts, and took some while to recover from that, right?
Yeah, in the scene where Linda Blair slaps me across the face and I land on the floor, I landed on my back. I had a rig around my midriff and a wire going out the back, and the stuntman yanked me into the floor so that Linda Blair didn't have to really slap me in the face. And the first time he did it, I got scared that I was going to get hurt. I could tell I was going to get hurt. And I said to Billy, Billy, he's pulling me too hard. Tell him not to pull me so hard. And Billy said, well, it has to look real. And I said, I know it has to look real, but I'm telling you I could get hurt. So the stuntman was standing there listening to me. And Billy looked at me and said, okay, don't pull her so hard. And then as he walked away and he walked away, I could feel out of the corner of my eye Billy cancel that with the stuntman. And he yanked me, and I landed on my coccyx, and it screamed in pain. And then I saw Billy touch the arm of the cameraman to come in closer on my scream. writhing in pain, and that made me very angry. And so I said, turn the beep, beep, bleep, bleep camera off so that he couldn't use it, which he did then because I ruined the shot on purpose. And I was on crutches for a while and had a lot of treatment. For the rest of the film, I wasn't walking very well. And it took actually years of treatment to get my back working so that it's not so vulnerable.
He shot it chronologically, didn't he? I think kind of.
Did I what?
Because your character kind of disappears for a while. Is that why? Because you were injured?
Well, I couldn't work for a couple of days.
Really?
And then I worked, and I was on crutches whenever I wasn't in a scene.
Wow.
Yeah.
The Exorcist, in a way, became the first blockbuster. Even a year before Jaws, it became the first big Hollywood movie just to make millions and millions of dollars.
Really?
Yeah. It's really considered the first blockbuster nowadays.
No kidding.
Or a year before Jaws, made $400 million, and then you had a lot of say with the studios after that, and Warner offered you the chance to make your own film with Alice, right?
Well, while we were shooting The Exorcist, the dailies, we were in New York, the dailies were going back to Hollywood. And John Calley was the head of Warner Brothers, and he was looking at them, and he called my agent and said, we want to make another picture with her. And so we said, great. So they sent us all the scripts that they had, that they owned with a female part in it. But this was 1973. And the women's movement was just coming alive, so that all of us women were being affected by the change in consciousness. And the scripts didn't reveal that or show that or understand that. The woman was either the dutiful wife who stayed home and made hot chocolate while the man went out and saved the world, or she was a prostitute, or she was a victim. So she was either the good wife or the bad girl or the one who got beat up and mangled and raped and killed. And I said, well, I would like to do a film that's about a woman as I see women are today. And so we found the script. Alice doesn't live here anymore, and I brought that to John Calley, and he said, okay. And he said, who do you want to direct it? Do you want to direct it? And I said, no, I'm not sure that was a good decision. But, well, I wasn't ready yet to act and direct at the same time. I am now, but it took a few years. And then he said, well, who do you want? And I said, somebody new and exciting, because by then I had learned, because Peter Bogdanovich's movie that I was in, it was his second movie. Billy Friedkin, it was his second movie. And I learned that directors go through the meat grinder sometime along the third or fourth movie, and they start getting conservative. And so I wanted somebody who was still whole, and their talent was still fresh. So I asked Francis Coppola, who I'd recommend, and he said, look at a film called Mean Streets, which Marty Scorsese had already sold to Warner Brothers. So I looked at it, and I had a meeting with Marty, and I said, Marty, I like your film very much, but I want this film to be shot from a woman's point of view. And I can't tell from looking at your film if you know anything about women. Do you? And he answered, no, but I'd like to learn, which is a brilliant answer, I think. And I went, I like this guy. So I hired him, and we went to work on Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. And he turned out to be Marty Scorsese. Who knew?
But it was the only movie he ever made it from a woman's point of view,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Harvey Keitel exploded in that movie too. He was an ex-Marine, right? He was coming out of the Marines at that time, and he had this violence kind of in him, right?
Yeah.
You had that scene where he beats up his wife and he beats up you, and he was really fearsome, I guess, at that.
That's the only time in all of my career when we shot that scene that I couldn't walk away from it. I started crying and I couldn't stop. And, you know, I cried through lunch and then I just got over it and then I started again. And they finally had to stop shooting for the rest of the day. That's the only time that's ever happened to me. And I don't know if I...
This is after The Exorcist. I mean...
Yeah. No, I never had any trouble. I'm asked very often if I have trouble getting out of a difficult scene, back to life, and I always say no, but that one time I did.
Did that hit home with your childhood memories?
I have no idea. I just was crying, and I just kept crying. And it probably had to do, because it was a very violent scene, he scared me to death. It probably had to do with the violence in my childhood, but it wasn't like I was remembering it. It wasn't that I had any thoughts about that. I just had feeling that was being released, and it wouldn't stop. So...
It was a pivotal movie, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, for the women's movement, because it was about a woman leaving and going out of the world on her own with no idea how to make it. And I gather they had a happy ending written where the woman would go back to the man, Chris Christopherson, and you didn't want that, is that right?
No, I wanted her to go on. I wanted her to go on, you know, seeking her fortune. Even though she wasn't a very good singer and wanted to be a singer. And they said, no, she has to end up with the man, with the Chris Christopherson character. So every time we would have it rewritten where I went off by myself, the studio would reject it, and it would always come back to, she goes off with the man. So I called John Calley, and I said, what is this? Why does she have to end up with a man? And he said, because we've already had a film with an unhappy ending and it didn't do good business. And so we only want a happy ending. And I said, wait a minute, are you saying to me that if she goes off on her own, that's an unhappy ending, but if she ends up with a man, that's a happy ending? And he said, no, what I'm saying is if she doesn't end up with a man, we ain't doing the movie. So I hear that. Okay, I understand that. So then we kept looking for the ending, and we couldn't find it. And everything we came up with, and the writer came up with, and the improvs and rehearsal came up with, it just wasn't right, and it was driving us all crazy. And finally, it was the night before we had to shoot that scene. So after we finished the day shooting, we went back in the restaurant to do another improv to see if we could come up with something. And all of a sudden, Chris Christopherson said, because the idea was that I wanted to go to Monterey. It's always about me getting to Monterey. And Chris Christopherson said, come on, I'll take you to Monterey. I don't give a damn about that ranch. That's where he lived, on a ranch. And I said, you will? I said, yeah. So that was the ending. The guy came up with it. I went on to Monterey. None of us, it never occurred to any of us that the man would be willing to sell his home to go with the woman to follow her dream. That was a brand new thought. We were not capable of thinking. Chris Christopherson came up with it.
Let's hear it for Chris Christopherson.
Yes.
And it inspired a generation of women, really, to take control of their own lives.
Yeah, and you know, that was 1974 when that came out. And it was a brand new revolutionary concept to tell a story from a woman's point of view. Nobody had ever thought of it before. And I want to say that from 1974 to 2016, there's been at least 10 more films told from a woman's point of view. There's movement, but it's slow. So I'm hoping that'll change one day.
Well, you contributed a big part to that. But taking your life into your own hands, you went back to Broadway then after the big success of The Exorcist, and Alice Doesn't Live Here was a big success for a small film in a way. You went back to Broadway and acted in Same Time Next Year, which won a Tony Award. How did that come about?
I was playing on Broadway when the Oscar thing happened, and I didn't go because I was playing on Broadway. And you know, it was one of those things where they would let me off so I could fly out to Los Angeles and fly back the next day and only miss one performance. But the show was such a big hit, and people waited 3 or 4 months for tickets, and they would have the show, but with an understudy. It just didn't seem fair to me. Now, I could have just gone, but it's one of those times where it's important to, or it was important to me, to examine my own value system. And I said, you know, what's important, the work or the reward for the work? And I had to choose the work. So I stayed in New York and watched it on television afterwards, and Marty accepted the award for me.
Amazing.
Thanks.
The next film was Alain René's Providence. It's one of these very kind of postmodern René scenarios where John Gielgud is a writer in bed dreaming up this story, and you're one of the characters in his story, it turns out.
It's the only film that I've ever done where when I saw it at the premiere, I realized I had played the character wrong. It's a terrible feeling. I went, oh my God, I am John Gielgud's creation. I should have been playing his idea of me. And I blew it. So, interesting thing about Alain René, for you filmmakers, we rehearsed for 2 weeks, and then and during those 2 weeks, we changed the script a lot with him. And when we finally had the script as it was going to be shot, he then takes 2 days off by himself and does the final edit of the film, but in the script, so that he doesn't shoot anything that's not going to be in the final film. So he has nothing on his cutting room floor. Oh. He's the only director I've ever worked with who does that. So that if we play this scene and it's going to be on you, he doesn't shoot my side. You know, I'm off camera.
Wow.
Yeah.
That explains a lot about Alain René, though.
Yeah, I've never seen any other director do that.
In the 1980s, you had a shot at your own sitcom, The Ellen Burstyn Show.
It was a terrible disaster. Just awful. I thought it, had certain value, but nobody else in the world did. So.
But it
had my name on it. It was the Ellen Burstyn Show. It's bad enough to fail, but to fail with your own name on it is.
Did that hurt your career? Did you suffer from that?
No.
Yeah. They stopped calling or something?
They what?
Did the agent stop calling then, or?
I only remember that I didn't work very much for a while. Uh-huh. It took a while to climb back up the ladder.
Uh-huh. In the 1990s, you had roles in How to Make an American Quilt, Spitfire Grill, and a movie that's one of my personal favorites that nobody's seen called Playing by Heart. So Sean Connery and young Angelina Jolie, Gina Rowlands, Ryan Philippe. It's one of these Robert Altman type ensemble films.
You know, it was a wonderful film, and I think they made a mistake changing the title to Playing by Heart, because I can never remember that title. You know, the
German title's even worse. It was Leben und Lieben in L.A., to live and love in Los Angeles. So it didn't go anywhere here, but it's a fantastic film. If you ever have a chance to check out Playing by Heart, Ellen plays the mother of a young man who's dying of cancer. It's an ensemble film which all comes together at the end. And
its original title was Dancing About Architecture, which
is the motto.
No sense at all. But in the film, somebody, I don't remember who, not me, says, talking about love is like dancing about architecture.
It was Angelina Jolie. So.
Oh, was it?
Yes.
Yeah. She was pretty good.
She was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
You were all amazing. It's an incredible film, and
Thank you.
nobody's seen it. But then in 2000, you were back in Requiem for a Dream. Darren Aronofsky, who most people also know from Black Swan, just an incredible story about a mother and a son both sliding into drug addiction, where you basically just play with the wall for 2 hours, and I don't know how you pull it off, but it's stunning. What was that experience like?
It's a great film. I love that film. I think it feels really good, as you can imagine, to be taking part in something that you know is really great work. I mean, great from the director. Darren Aronofsky is just a dream. He's smart and talented and educated and kind and responsible, and he's just as fine a man as I've ever known. And that experience, it was a low-budget film. We didn't have any, we were shooting in Brooklyn in an abandoned warehouse. There were no frills, but you could tell from the beginning that I turned down the film, actually, when it was offered to me, when the script was offered to me. I went, oh, this is so depressing. Who wants to see these depressing people? And my agent at the time, who's now my manager, said, before you turn it down, look at a film called Pi. And I put on Pi on my TV at home, and I saw about 3 minutes of it, and I said, I get it. The guy's an artist. So I said yes to it, and I just love him. I think he's really one of the best filmmakers.
How did you research the process of addiction?
Well, it so happened that I was doing a production of Long Day's Journey and Tonight, so I was playing Mary Tyrone. Mm-hmm. So I had done a lot of research on addiction to play Mary, and Darren came where I was playing in Connecticut and saw the production, and we talked afterwards, and we both decided we wanted to work together. Mm-hmm. It was a low-budget film. We were sneaking the camera on the subway at 5 in the morning when it's the least crowded, and doing guerrilla shots in the train, and the police would go by and we'd have to hide the camera.
You were shooting a guerrilla film when you were 68?
Yeah. Why not? It's a great movie. I love it.
House of Cards, then you just introduced here on the weekend. We showed 2 episodes of your amazing turn as the mother of Robin Wright. You've done television before. We kind of
yeah, but I've never done anything like House of Cards. I'll tell you, it was streamed the whole 4th season on the weekend. And Monday, I went out to walk my dog in Central Park, and I swear everybody in that park had seen House of Cards on the weekend. I've never experienced anything like it in my life, including The Exorcist, that has such a huge fan base, and they're so devoted to it. It was amazing. And, people would, like, from across the street go, ah, like that. House of Cards, okay.
Robin Wright directs some of the episodes. Yeah. Did she direct you? Did you work with her at all?
I did 6 episodes, and she directed, I think, 4.
She directed you?
Uh-huh.
Wow. What's she like as a director?
She's a very popular director with the crew. They love her. She likes directing more than acting now. She's very cool, and no, cool's wrong. Reserved, like Claire is, like her character is, except she's not mean. She's, a lovely person. And I can't say that she actually gave me any direction, but as I say, I don't really get direction very much.
She just turned you loose and let you do it. But you become mother and daughter in those few short scenes. It's incredible.
We just did it. We didn't talk about it. Yeah.
Could you read her? Could you identify with her? Or could you?
With her?
Uh-huh. Or is this another of your childhood memories of your mother, perhaps? I was thinking about that character you played when I was reading your book about your
My mother
your
wasn't reserved. She was very forceful. A very strong character and demonstrative, let's say. No, I watched the show. I watched seasons 1, 2, and 3, so I had a good feeling for who Claire was, and I just thought in terms of my job being letting the audience now understand what Claire is coming from, where she's coming from. That who I am explains who Claire is. So that's the path I took in that character. I figured she was smart, reserved, Republican.
Why does she hate Frank Underwood?
He has no class. He's white trash. You know? It's a class thing.
Wonderful. The last film we're showing tonight at 8 o'clock. It's sold out, unfortunately, but maybe a few of you have tickets. Is Wiener Dog by Todd Solondz, House of Dolls, Todd Solondz. It's an episodic film united by this dachshund who leads to the film. And you play kind of an embittered old lady, or I didn't actually find her that bitter. That's kind of what we wrote on the website. But her daughter comes to visit, and granddaughter comes to visit, and hasn't seen her for 4 years and wants money. And then she goes out and has this vision of what her life could have been, or how would you describe it?
I think it's a dream. I think she has a dream where these characters come to her and ask her, not ask her, really tell her who she could, introduce her to what she could have been if she had had the courage to live her life instead of being afraid and not fully committing to life. Because now she has, I think, no hope. She has no hope that anything good is going to happen to her. And I think that she lost hope when she said no to many possibilities. So I think the message from her is live your life. Really live it. There's a great Mary Oliver poem. Starts when death comes. And at the end of the poem, she says, when death comes, I don't want to have just been a visitor to this world. And I think that's a very important message, and I think that's the message of my character in Wiener Dog.
That's a good message for today. Ladies and gentlemen, Ellen Burstyn.